I just got out of the theater from witnessing the 2022 Elvis film on the big screen, and I'd like to talk about it with all of y'all. So without further ado, let's get into the review, guys. Let's go. What's going on, you guys? The Demigod back on Demigod ENT. Today I'm bringing you another movie review for Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. Now, this was a hell of a theatrical experience, guys, and I know I've been gone for a few days. Your boy's been thinking up some new content ideas, but every time I go to the cinemas, I just feel this brand new inspiration, especially if I witness a great movie. And I think this is one of those moments, man. This was a hell of a theatrical experience, guys. Now, before we go ahead and get on into this, I just want to mention that I've never been super into Elvis or anything before going to see this movie. In fact, that's the case with a lot of these biopics that Hollywood puts out. So I was especially intrigued with going to see this one because I wanted to know if this movie would succeed in making me an Elvis fan, considering, all I know about him is what I see in pop culture entertainment. I'm not into his music or anything like that. And also, I was aware going into this movie that he was heavily inspired by black culture. Now, they mixed a little bit of that into the trailers. I was honestly worried about how that was going to play out. I thought they would do it in like sort of a cheesy way inside of here, but they didn't. They did it in a way that was honorable, that was respectable, and I really liked seeing those elements inside of that film, how interwoven that was with Elvis's story from the very beginning of his career to the very end of his career. And yeah, man, this was a hell of a film. Now, that being said, I am still a film critic, and this film was not without its flaws, so we're going to get into those too. But first, I want to talk about the positive elements of this film. First things first, Austin Butler starring as the main lead here, Elvis Presley. He does a fantastic job inside of this movie. At certain times during this film, you can't even tell the two apart. I mean, he brings such a charisma and a liveliness to this performance and an authenticness here that just put a smile on my face watching him perform. Watching him take the stage later in Elvis's life, man, just brilliant stuff here, man. And of course, not to skip over the story of this movie, that being Elvis Presley's life. Now, where we first pick up with Elvis inside of here is with the Colonel, Tom Parker, played by Tom Hanks, Elvis Presley's manager. Now, we pretty much almost are guided through the film through his eyes and through his lens from the start of it and during certain parts of it, though. That's not to say that, we don't get Elvis's perspective with inside of here. Now, where it picks up is Tom Hanks' character, the manager, pretty much is hearing Elvis played on the radio. He's beginning to spark up some notoriety around his town, and the Colonel, Tom Parker, makes it his mission to find Elvis. And once he finds Elvis, he makes him one of the biggest stars in the world, takes him all over the United States, gets him, record publishing deals that are international so that his music can be heard all around the world. And this movie really hits it home that, he makes Elvis who he is almost in terms of his big, popular celebrity status. Now, this movie also makes it a point to show the flaws in the Colonel's character, and especially towards the end of this film, how he was financially abusive to Elvis throughout his life. Of course, Elvis lived from 1935 to 1977, I believe it is. A very interesting time in American history and American culture, a big culture shift during these times, and you see that with inside these movies from, big public assassinations that are happening and that are displayed all over the TV, through big political movements and moments in history, and how Elvis, played his part in it, believed in it. And that was a very interesting take for this movie to go with. And by the way, if I didn't mention it, Tom Hanks is fantastic inside of this movie. I mean, he loses himself in this role. You could barely tell it's Tom Hanks playing this character. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, to dive deeper into Elvis's, inspiration from black culture. I mean, they straight up show you inside of this movie. Obviously, he's taken certain songs, certain dance moves and movements and rhythm from black culture, and it makes it a point to show that Elvis, wasn't just someone who just outright stills it. He's involved in the community to a certain extent. He goes to see their shows, he's inspired, he likes what he sees. It's the music that he personally loves, which makes sense because a majority of artists want to make art that is similar to what originally inspired them, right? And so you see him interact with certain individuals with inside the culture, that being black culture. You see how much love he has for these individuals and for their culture in general. And I just love the way the movie portrayed that, and like I said in the beginning of this review, did it in a respectful way, because it very easily could have been done badly, I'll just say that. And so moving on from that, man, to Elvis himself, seeing, you know, the complications of fame with inside this film, how like lonely he feels during certain moments of this movie, even though he's this big star that gets love from everybody, you know, seeing how much the stage meant to him and being a performer meant to him and how much like he lived and thrived off of it. It was really exciting stuff to see brought to life on the big screen. And also, you know, seeing his relationship with his family, with his loved ones, you know, you kind of get these two sides of him: Elvis, the entertainer, and then Elvis, the, you know, the family man who just wants to look after his family, wants to take care of his mother, his father, you know, all his loved ones, and the complications that brings, his relationship with his wife and his kid later in his life. And man, let me tell you guys, this movie takes a very dark turn in the third act, where we see Elvis almost be bigger than life as he takes over Vegas. You know, he becomes the biggest star on the planet, at least they say so with inside this movie, and I believe he is still the biggest solo recording artist of all time at this current moment in time, which is extremely impressive achievement right there. But at the same time, during this moment, he's disconnected from his wife. He's having his own feelings of emptiness inside. He's hopped up on pills, and it's just really sad to see. So much so that by the end of this movie, you know, a lot of the crowd members were in tears. I mean, they walked out of this movie crying, seeing how, you know, Elvis's life ended and how much good he wanted to do, but how much bad still came of it. And wow, this was a very deep movie. Man, by the end of this movie, I felt a lot of different emotions, I will say that. And with that being said, I think it's the perfect time for us to get into the negatives of this film, because there are negatives with this film. First things first, the first act of this movie. The first act of this movie feels jumbled. It feels like a mixed bag. It feels like it's trying to tell so many different stories at once, like it's trying to catch us up to something so it could really begin telling the story that the movie wants to tell. And in doing that, it makes a mess of things. It really does. There's lots of jump cuts all over the place, so many different storylines intertwining at once that it's trying to follow. And while it does come with, you know, its own exciting and memorable moments, it also comes with a feeling of being lost and not exactly knowing what it's trying to do until the second act kicks in. Now, once the second act of this movie kicks in, and especially the second and third act, those are the big moments here, man. I mean, that's when everything kicks up. The acting kicks up, the directing kicks up, the story is more cohesive, and by the second and third act of this movie, it's definitely worth sitting through that first act, I will say that. And aside from that negative, I do have a problem with the runtime of this movie. Now, I get it. You're trying to tell the life of this, you know, huge, iconic star in American history and in music history, and there's a lot to cover here. I mean, you want to cover his entire life because it does, you know, go a little bit from his childhood to all the way to the end of his life. And so there's so much ground to cover that a lot of the time during this movie, it feels like we're just sitting in scenes for way too long. You know, I found myself checking the clock at certain points during this movie, which I personally never really do for any other film. It did begin to drag during the second act, I will say that, though I did like those scenes and parts of the movie. And it just felt like definitely certain things could have been cut here, could have been tightened up just a little bit. Though with that being said, I definitely enjoyed this 2 hour and 40-minute experience. I'm just telling you, before you go in, expect 2 hours and 40 minutes, you know, expect a long theater experience, and you should be fine going into this movie. And with that being said, guys, you know, I really enjoyed this film. As you could tell, I had a hell of a time watching this. I love seeing him on stage. I love the music inside of here. One more flaw that I have with the film, it has an inclusion of modern music. I don't really like that in my biopics, especially ones that are about, you know, old artists. It really feels super out of place and kind of throws me off and kind of takes you out, because it, you know, I'm being transferred into the 30s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and then it's like, boom, I'm back in 2022. You don't really want that happening. It kind of conflicts with what we're trying to do here. But outside of that, man, a fantastic theater experience, a fantastic time at the cinemas, and we're gonna just drop the rating here for you. So I give Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, I give Baz Luhrmann's Elvis a 8.5 out of 10. It gets the 8.5 out of 10. I was sitting lower on the scoreboard for this movie, to be completely honest with you, leaving the second act. And then once I witnessed that third act and just how dark and deep into the character that this film got, it just had to be bumped up, man. I mean, this is an amazing experience, a movie that I think a lot of people will definitely enjoy. And like I said, people were walking out of this film crying real tears, man. I mean, how often do you see that at the cinemas? And yeah, man, definitely a great experience. If you don't know what I do here on Demigod ENT, I do commentaries, reactions, and reviews. So if you're interested in any of that, you're in the right place, man. Hit subscribe, hit the like button. I drop multiple videos a week on the channel, so you can expect out of me. And if you don't already know, I am the Demigod, the chosen one here on Demigod ENT, and I'm out of this thing, man. I'll catch y'all in the next video. Appreciate y'all for watching with your boy. Peace.